In this video, we are going to talk about the COVID crash. This was the biggest crash of the S&P 500 in this decade. And the crash culminated in a low on this day here, March 23, 2020. So this was the lowest price in the S&P 500 index in this decade, and I think it was almost like a 50% top, a 50% crash from the top that was like 1 month earlier. The top was on February 20 and February 19. So within like a couple of days or a couple of weeks, there was this big crash that that the media said was due to COVID. But it's actually very similar, from the astrological point of view to the 1929 crash. Here we have the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint, which is in the sign Capricorn. And here we have the Uranus-Neptune midpoint, which is in the sign Aries. So these signs are square to each other. Now, when you look at this, it doesn't really look like a square like to most astrologers, because if it would be a square, then this Jupiter-Saturn midpoint would be like at 11 something, 11.8 something, but it's not. But if you lay over this horoscope the 24th harmonic, that is like the harmonic that master trader V.W. Gann was using, then you get like a very different picture. So let me do this here. I put in now 24th harmonic, which means I divide like the circle into 24 parts instead of 12 parts. And why I do this, because there are 24 hours in a day. They're not 12 hours in a day, but they're like 12 hours like in half of the day. So this is now the 24th harmonic, and you see here that the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint is now squaring the Uranus-Neptune midpoint, just as during the 1929 crash. And I'm now going to move this like forward per 1 day, so that you see exactly why the crash occurred on this day, and not on the day before, the day after. Now this day was a Monday, so I moved this now 4. And as you see on the next day, this Jupiter-Saturn is still like in square to Uranus-Neptune. And on the next day also, now it's like almost like this square is now like exact. They're both at 11.9 degrees. And on the next day, March 26, you see Jupiter-Saturn is now already past Uranus-Neptune. So now there's no longer like a square. So basically the square was exact on March 24, on March 25. That was when the square was exact. If you would have calculated it mathematically, there was a 75-degree aspect between Jupiter-Saturn and Uranus-Neptune on this day. But on the 24th harmonic, you really see it's like a square, because they're both like in signs that are square to each other, and at 11.9 degrees here. And you go back and you see like, how close like this square is. And then when you go like previous day, you see March 20, that was the previous trading day, you see that this square is not exact. There's like now like 0.3 difference, 11.4 versus 11.7. So if you go on March 23, it's only now like 1 decimal, 11.7, 11.8. You see the square is pretty close. Now it got exact on March 25, and as a skeptic of astrology, you would of course ask now, well, why didn't it happen on March 25? Why did it happen on March 23 when the square between Jupiter, Saturn and Uranus, Neptune was exact on March 25? And the answer is that we have to also look at the sun. Because the sun, this is the sun, and you see the sun moves 1 degree per day. So here on March 24, the sun is at 4.8 degrees. And as I explained in the past videos, the sun rules the day. So things do not happen randomly in astrology. They happen like on a day when the sun is at a certain degree. Now, if you look at this, it would make sense to think that the sun should be at 11 degrees in order like for something to happen. But if we like go like here and move like the sun like to 11 degrees, now we see it's already 12 degrees. We see there's no longer like a square here. Now we get now like to April 1, and to the best of my knowledge there was like a low around April 1 in the financial markets. You can check that. But here the sun is like conjunct Uranus Neptune also, and that is kind of like positive because conjunctions are rather positive. I will show that like in the next videos. So you see it's kind of like not so easy. But what we want to learn here today is why this low was on March 23. And the way we do this, as I explained in the video of the 1929 crash, which is very much like the same setup here. We have Jupiter, Saturn and Uranus, Neptune in square signs. And we have the 24th harmonic that I also used to explain the 1929 crash. When I said that this low on November 13, that was when the sun triggered this Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune square back then on the 24th harmonic. And so now we add like the point G, which is like the midpoint of Jupiter, Saturn and Uranus, Neptune. So this is the point G. And you see now that on the close of March 23, the sun is just like applying like to this point G. That means it's like applying to this horrible square between Jupiter, Saturn and Uranus, Neptune on the 24th harmonic. While on the next day, March 24, the sun is already past the midpoint of this square. And that means that on this day, the event is already past, so the market would rise because the sun is no longer applying like to the square with Jupiter, Saturn and Uranus, Neptune. Only on this day the market was applying to this square, and this created a lot of fear because everybody knew, or some people knew, that when the sun is applying like to this square between Jupiter, Saturn and Uranus, Neptune, it's not possible for the market like to rise because we have like this square, and these are the 5 biggest planets. So, and this basically explains, now if you go like to the morning, you see like this, on the morning of March 24, this square like was like most exact, and if you like bought like on the morning, the actual low was on the evening of March 23, and it would now, I have an explanation for this, it would now go a little bit like too far like to explain this. But basically, if you just like go on a daily basis, if you just trade on the close of the day, you would say, okay, I buy on the close of this day because on this day the sun is applying to Chi, while on the next day the sun is no longer applying to Chi, it's past Chi. And if you go like back on this day, you can also bring here like another point. And at this point I cannot reveal what this point really is, except that it's a midpoint of 4 bodies. Let's call them bodies, and you see like that on the close of this day the sun, the midpoint of the sun and this point is 4.2 or 4.3, which is exactly like this point G. But even if you cut like this point out, if you give this away, you would simply conclude, okay, yeah, this is like the day I trade on the close of the day. This is like the day where I buy my call options or close my put options, because on this day the sun is applying to the point G, while on the next day it is no longer applying to the point G. And this means that just in the 1929 crash, on the very day of the COVID crash, March 23, 2020, the sun has triggered the square between Jupiter Saturn and Uranus Neptune on the 24th harmonic. To close this video, I will now add like the position of Jupiter Saturn and of Uranus Neptune, so that you can see like, okay, this is the midpoint of this is the midpoint of this, and this is like the Sun triggering the point G.